If you want to grow as a Christian, then you're going to be learning from different pastors and teachers and other Christian leaders. Some of that will likely happen in a local church setting, but a lot of other times you're going to find people online or maybe an author that somebody suggests for you. But before you just blindly jump on board with any leader, it's really important to determine if they're actually on Team Jesus or just wearing the jersey. In today's video, we're going to dive into the crucial art of discernment. And trust me, the dangers of following a shepherd in disguise are real. You don't want to miss out on how to safeguard your spiritual journey. So stick around. I think what you're about to discover could be a game changer for your faith. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm Thad, and this is the Journey Church Online. We are an out-of-the-box ministry that's all about teaching the Bible in a way that's interesting and seriously effective. With over 20,000 miles of travels and adventures under our belt, we're sure that you're going to find some lessons on our channel that are going to resonate with you and help you level up as a Jesus follower. Well, after months on the road in northern Canada and Alaska, it's been pretty nice to pause and reconnect with friends and family and do some really needed maintenance and repairs. So we're going to head over to my friend Bruce's place, to the shop, and we're going to dig into lesson number 17 in this series that we're going through, the Sermon on the Mount. Well, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus takes time to point out that not everyone who says they're doing things in his name actually is. He makes it clear that there's a vital skill that every Christian needs to be aware of and develop. It's the art of fruit inspecting. But this skill from Jesus is a little tricky. You have to really pay attention to what Jesus says, because far too many people don't understand what he's teaching here in this passage, and then they go around trying to use this fruit inspecting technique in all sorts of wrong ways. Well, hammers don't make great saws. It's not really rocket science. Everybody sort of knows they're not designed to cut through wood, right? And when you try to use a hammer to cut up some wood, you're just going to make a huge mess. And that's exactly the visual that I want you to remember when you learn this skill that Jesus teaches about in this passage. It's meant to be used in a really specific situation. And if you go around trying to use it everywhere, you're just going to make a big mess. Speaking of messes, we'll circle back to this one in a few minutes. Well, this lesson from Jesus is about what the Bible calls false prophets. And in our culture, I think a lot of people read something like that, warning from Jesus about false prophets, and it's kind of easy to think that maybe it was just a thing for way back in the ancient times. I think a lot of people imagine maybe a false prophet in our culture would look really easy to spot because they'd be some sort of quack out on a street corner or some weirdo cult leader. But the thing is, that's actually where you'd probably be wrong. It's actually a lot harder to determine if somebody is leading you toward the narrow gate that leads to life or down the wide road that leads to destruction. Thankfully, Jesus breaks it down in Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 through 20. Here's how he explains it there. Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. Digging around the shop, and it helps when your friend's a part-time retired taxidermist. He just happens to have some coyote skins here. These are not wolves. It would be a little baby wolf, but man, look at that. All right, here we go. The lengths that we will go to in order to teach you lessons about the Sermon on the Mount. Boy, this is a big coyote. Yeah. All right, here we go. So, I can honestly say this is the first time in my life I've ever worn coyote sleeves. This is a new fashion trend for sure. Jesus said that it was a big deal to look out for false prophets, and the picture that he gave his disciples was that they would go around like a wolf in sheep's clothing, like literally putting on wolf skin, pretending to be something that they're not. Wolf skin? Sheepskin. They were a wolf that wore sheep. I got this all backwards. We got to find some sheep to wear. Dang it. All right, anyways, you get the idea. I don't know what. I think I might come back and see if I can put together a puppet show later.
Would you like to do that, Roger? Why, yes, Steve. I think that would be lovely. Apparently, coyotes have a slightly British accent, and it's a poor one at that.
All right, back to the lesson. So Jesus warns that these false prophets are going to appear like innocent and harmless and like a wolf coming in sheep's clothing, but they're not harmless. These false prophets are usually looking to take advantage of you, or maybe even just lead you away from the narrow gate that leads to life. And he tells his disciples how to recognize these false prophets, and he uses a pretty straightforward parable to explain it. It's all about checking the fruit on the tree. Jesus says it's pretty simple. Good trees produce good fruit, and bad trees produce bad fruit. In other words, like English, in other words, good teachers produce good fruit, and bad teachers or preachers or leaders will produce bad fruit. So the metaphor is pretty straightforward and it's easy to understand. But I think the truth is, it actually takes some real effort to learn how to inspect the fruit of a preacher or a pastor or a church leader. It's not so easy as just walking up to an apple tree to see if it's growing good apples. And this is where this teaching from Jesus gets a bit harder to apply, because we live in an instant information world of Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and TikTok videos. We've really been trained to get our information in quick sound bites. Rarely do you know the whole story, like it's not morning. There are a lot of roosters and chickens here chiming in to give their 2 cents on the lesson. So far what I've learned is they can't tell time. Back to the lesson. The thing is, it's pretty rare that we know the whole story, and we almost never know anything about the character and fruit of the actual people that we're hearing from or listening to. And living this way has really dulled the senses in a way. We're so comfortable consuming so much information from so many sources that we've completely forgotten about this lesson from Jesus. You see, fruit inspection takes time. It takes effort. It takes research. It takes relationships. And the warning from Jesus is still super relevant. He's saying to you today, be really wise about who you follow online. Be really intentional about who you learn the Bible from. Be slow to choose a church or pick a pastor to learn from. And before you do, take some time and inspect the fruit in their lives. Now, I think a lot of people understand the idea, but they get really stuck on how would they actually apply this teaching from Jesus. They kind of maybe just guess, like, okay, well, this might be what good fruit looks like in somebody's life, but more times than not, what they're measuring is how many followers somebody has, or how popular they are, or how big their church is, or how many books they've written. But none of those things are the right kind of fruit to inspect. That's like saying, look at all the leaves on that apple tree over there. It's so full and the leaves are just big and flush and amazing. Not the one behind me, right? But really what Jesus is trying to point out is it's not about measuring the leaves. It's about trying to see if an apple tree actually has apples on it. Luckily, God's Word provides some great insights to the kinds of apples that we should look for in a Christian leader or teacher. So in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, Paul gives us some great tips on the kind of fruit that shows up in people's lives when they're really synced up with God. Here is how he explained it there in that passage. He says, "But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Well, there you have it. If you want to be wise about who you learn the Bible from, about the authors you read, and about the preachers that you listen to, then you would be wise to take some time to do your homework and look to see if the kind of fruit in their lives matches up with the things that Paul talks about in that letter to Galatians. Do people describe them as loving and joyful? Do they seem to have a sense of peace about them, even as the world around them is tossed to and fro when they're going through really difficult situations? Have you ever seen them exhibit patience? Are they kind? Would others who know them really well, would they describe them as good or faithful or gentle? Do they strike you as somebody that has self-control? Well, as you can probably tell, these are not the kinds of things that you can determine in just a few minutes. You're gonna need to put some serious effort into fruit inspecting if you don't want to be led astray by a false teacher or a wolf in sheep's clothing. All right, before we wrap up, I want to go back to the shop and to that hammer mess that I was making in there and highlight one more really important thing about this teaching from Jesus. Let's go. All right, let's break this down. Some people take this teaching from Jesus and they want to apply it to everybody that says they're a Christian. I think they sort of think that they should assign themselves as the official fruit inspectors to decide who's really a Christian and who's not. Well, number one, that is not what this passage is about. And number two, if you're honestly putting yourself in the position where you think that you have the authority to determine if somebody is saved or not, you should probably take a hard look back at the episode that we taught about judging others. Make sure you look in the description for the link for that one. Funny little side note about that episode on judging others. We filmed it up in Alaska and we were close to the ocean, which we're not used to being close to the ocean. So we completely forgot that the ocean has a tide and we almost lost our truck because the tide was coming in. You'll see it in the episode. Kind of a fun little, I don't know if it was fun. Kayla sort of panicked. She saved the truck. So we still have a truck. It's also important to remember that it's not up to us to go out and chop down the trees that grow bad fruit. That is God's department. Remember, Jesus said that every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown into the fire. So let God take care of dealing with his enemies. Our job is to be way more intentional about discerning who we're listening to and who we're learning from. By the way, if you ever want to connect with us and learn more about us, definitely just reach out. You can drop a comment or jump on the website and find our contact information there. Speaking of website, you can read all of our blogs. We're super vulnerable, super open about our story, and as well as what we believe as Christians. So feel free to reach out to us anytime if you's all got any questions. Yous all can reach out to us and stuff. Sometimes you talk to a camera for a long time, weird things start to come out of your mouth. It just happens. Speaking of learning from people, I've been having some fun here in the workshop learning how to do some wood carving from my friend Bruce. He coached me through my first little grizzly bear that I carved out of a hunk of driftwood, and hopefully get to work my way up to some bigger project. But he's somebody that I can learn these things from because he has the proof or the fruit in his life to show that he's a great artist and an experienced carver. So I'm going to leave you this week with a fun little project that he just whipped out over the course of a few hours. So I hope you enjoy this. We'll see you next week from wherever we are out there.